Hi, my name is April, and this is High Fantasy Writing. So about a month ago, I finished reading Dune because I wanted to read it before the movie came out, and it has since come out, and I am super, super, super excited to go and see it. I'm seeing it in IMAX because I feel like the vibe it's giving off is very much so an atmospheric movie that I'm really going to want to watch in IMAX. But with this, of course, the discussion and stuff around Dune has come up again, the discourse, as one might say, and I felt like I should throw my little 2 cents in. Now, I've already done a video about prophetic love and how Dune falls into that trope that I really, really despise. But there are some things that, especially after reading the appendices of Dune, the first book, because I haven't read any of the other books in the series, there are a couple of things that I kind of had hope that Dune wasn't going to fall into, but reading the appendices, it kind of solidified that, yeah, this is what Dune is saying, and I wanted to talk about it. So obviously this video is going to contain spoilers for the first book, Dune, in the series, and the appendices. So if you haven't seen the movie or read the book yet, unless you want to be spoiled, maybe go watch the movie, quickly read the book, and then come back. So I have seen the argument that Dune falls into yet another story perpetuating the white savior, or in this case, the civilized person savior, coming into a indigenous culture, an outsider coming in and taking control of the people and leading them as their new Messiah, leader, savior, prophet, God, what have you. Now, some of the criticisms I've been seeing is saying that it's glorifying, yet again, another thing like Game of Thrones did with Daenerys, glorifying the white savior leader who comes in, saves the poor, uncivilized cultures, and shows them a better way of living, a way to not be uncivilized anymore, and take off, and it's viewed as a good thing, at least largely a good thing. While some, like Game of Thrones, tried to say like, oh no, that all was bad, we just pretended like it wasn't when it was happening. No, Game of Thrones very much so said that what Daenerys was doing was right, and a lot of people agreed that her initial actions, killing the slavers, changing the Dothraki culture to not be as misogynistic, that sort of thing, freeing the slaves in Marine, I believe it was, those were viewed as good things, and even in hindsight, like, that's a pretty good thing to stop bad rulers. Now, the issue, actually, that I have with Dune kind of ties into that, that aspect of the white savior trope. And that is, it's not so much the person coming in, like what the author is saying about the person who is an outsider coming into this new culture. It's more what the author is saying about the indigenous culture, or the culture that is being infiltrated by this colonizer, white savior, etc. It's what the author is saying about the culture that is having the white savior come into it that I have an issue with. So obviously I can see in Dune that Paul Atreides coming in to take control of the Fremen of the Dune. I guess, isn't the planet called Dune? I don't know. I think it has a different name, but Arrakis? Is it Arrakis? I don't know. There are a lot of names. it's okay. I still know what I'm talking about. So obviously it is shown that Paul coming in to take over the Fremen and be their leader, their messiah, their prophet, could lead to very bad situations. So I don't think that Frank Herbert is trying to glorify Paul Atreides as a white savior coming in and doing good things. I don't think that that's what Frank Herbert is trying to do with Dune. But I had a massive issue with how the Fremen were presented, because the issues with white saviorism is that it always dehumanizes the native culture. And don't get all pedantic on me and say, actually, there are no indigenous people at Arrakis. They're all colonizers. Yeah, no duh. Same with all of the Earth. Africa is where humans originated, so like the Native Americans, the First Peoples, the First Nations, they didn't like spring out of the ground in North America, but they had been living here long enough for us to be able to call them the indigenous peoples of the Americas. That's what we're talking about here. Don't get all pedantic on me. So what the white savior trope, like the main issue I have with the white savior trope, is that it removes all agency from the indigenous population. It removes all sense of, I don't know, independence from this group of people, any semblance of they are comfortable leading themselves. So the Fremen, I thought what the story was going for was that the Fremen would have had already a very long history of having this prophecy, prophecy, that somebody was going to come from the outside and lead them to be able to create an oasis of Arrakis. And this new person coming in who was an outsider, this would have been an ancient belief, generations upon generations believing this prophecy. And then Paul Atreides and his mother show up, and so they are like, oh, look, this belief that we have had for generations is coming true. That's what I thought it was going to skew towards. I thought that all of Jessica Atreides' thoughts about how, oh, the Bene Gesserit, I think, Bene Gesserit, the witch ladies who kind of have their fingers dabbling in everything. Whenever she's thinking, oh, see all of these prophecies, that shows that the Bene Gesserit have come in and they've seeded all of these prophecies, so that when we need to take control of them, we can. I was really looking to see that that wasn't the case, that the Fremen actually had this as their own belief system, independent of this outside colonizing force of the witch ladies coming in. And so I was really looking forward to having Jessica realize that, oh, maybe these people have independent thought from us who think that we're so much better and we can control them. But that's not what happened. What happened was, yet again, the insistence that indigenous people cannot rule themselves. They are savages, they are uncivilized, and they are just begging for an outsider to come in to lead them because they just want to be able to worship something other than something apart from themselves. They want to be able to create a jihad, go out and murder everyone who isn't them. That's what this story is saying the Fremen are. They just immediately say, oh, hey, look, Paul Atreides, a literal child who doesn't ask for authority. He's not going in and saying, oh, I'm going to take over. He's not going in and seeing a cruel leader in the Fremen and killing that person and then them being like, oh, you've released us from this oppressive rule. Like, that's not what's happening. Paul is a 14-year-old little boy who just shows up in the desert, and all of these people just say, civilized boy is our leader now. We're going to follow him and believe him to be a godlike figure. That's what happens. That's what Frank Herbert is saying the people of Arrakis, the Fremen, are like. And then it even goes deeper than that, in that I thought that their dream of making Arrakis an oasis and gathering the water and being able to manipulate it in a way that would be able to have different oases among the desert, they would be like, that was a goal that these Fremen people had had for generations. I thought that that's something that they would have had for generations wanted to do, is like that was kind of their culture's goal. But then I read the appendix and I was like, oh, no, this has only been like one generation that they've wanted to do this, because Liet Kynes' father, an outsider, came in, said, hey, you dumb people living here in the desert and who have been living here for generations, you're so dumb. Look at all this water. We can actually grow plants with this if you weren't so dumb. And then he is the one who created the oasis that Jessica and some of the women go to in the Book of Dune. He was the one who made them change their entire culture to focus around collecting water so that one day they can like terraform the planet and make it livable. Like, I just feel like maybe Frank Herbert had good intentions with saying that, like, the white savior outsider who's civilized coming into a uncivilized peoples and just taking over is bad, obviously. I feel like maybe he had good intentions with that, but the traits that he gave the Fremen, the history he gave the Fremen, at least in this book, the lack of agency that is completely pervasive in the Fremen culture is just, it really makes me uncomfortable. And I rated this as a 4-star read when I first finished reading it, because it was enjoyable. I saw why it was so important to the science fiction fantasy genre. But I did have these issues with the way the Fremen people had been presented that I just couldn't get past. And the more people defend it and say, actually, no, it's this wonderful story about how terrible white saviors are, the more I feel the need to speak out about how terribly all of that treats the Indigenous people. Because all the focus is always on that white savior, that civilized person coming in. All the focus is on them. None of the focus is ever put on the Indigenous people and their agency. It is always, always framed as white person comes in, or civilized outsider comes into this society, and this society just rolls over for them, just blindly follows them, doesn't have any sense of maybe this isn't the best leader for us, is a random 14-year-old. And to me, personally, that's what we need to be talking about, is not like the white savior coming in and their actions. It's the fact that authors give so little agency to the peoples who are being infiltrated. So either you can interpret the Fremen fully embracing Paul, a 14-year-old, as their leader, as the Fremen being completely incapable of writing their own destiny, of them being just pawns in the game of the civilized people. Or you can view it as the Fremen are actively malicious and they actively want to follow, like rabidly, devoutly follow a god figure so that they can go and murder the entire galaxy. Like, I don't see how you can't interpret Dune and Paul's visions of a jihad perpetrated by the Fremen people as anything other than Frank Herbert saying that Indigenous people are so just uncivilized and savage that if you give them a bad leader, then they're just going to turn into rabid animals that want to murder the entire galaxy. Like, and just blindly follow and accept this outsider telling them to do this, or they take it upon themselves to say, no, this is our God, even if he's trying to stop us from doing this. This is our God, and so we're going to kill in his name. Like, I don't see any other way to interpret that other than taking away any agency or, I don't know, nuance to the Fremen culture. So maybe the Fremen are given a lot more nuance in the later books, and maybe there are sects of the Fremen who don't blindly follow Paul and like call out the other ones who are just saying, yes, we're just going to blindly follow this guy because he's our prophet. Maybe in later books they do have that, but in this book, in the appendixes where we get to see the history of the Fremen people, I'm not seeing that right now. Right now, all I'm seeing is somebody who wanted to say that white saviors are bad, but did it in a way that made it so the indigenous people having the white savior thrust upon them were seen as idiots and savages and uncivilized and just so desperate to find somebody to worship that they just grabbed the first 14-year-old boy that they thought like fulfilled some prophecy. And that's not good. So as writers and as people consuming media, when the talk of white saviors or the civilized person coming in to take over the uncivilized society comes up, I think we need to shift talk away from the actions of the invader and talk more about and look more closely at how the author has depicted the group that is being invaded, how that group is shown to be, because even here in Dune, when I think Frank Herbert was trying to say, hey, look, doing that, invading, is bad, maybe take a look at how they're treating the Indigenous people and what they're saying the Indigenous people are saying about this. And keep in mind that maybe you shouldn't make the Indigenous people lack any agency and be just so willing to jump into the arms of a white savior. Maybe take a look at that more closely than you do the white savior's actions, who's obviously wrong. Like, at this point in society, we know that white saviorism is bad. So take a look at how the author is depicting the people who the white savior is trying to control. Take a look at that and see how they're treating the agency of the Indigenous people. So I think that's all I had to say on this topic. I'm sure that that was really rambly, but I hope you got what I was trying to say. And if you want to throw hate my way because you think Dune is a perfect masterpiece that you're not allowed to criticize, then go ahead, leave a dislike and an angry comment. Cool. Good for you. But if you did get something out of this video, do go ahead and leave a like, maybe a comment, subscribe if you want to see more, and just, I guess, think about that next time that you are watching a show, reading a book, watching a movie, reading a comic that might have some white savior tropes in it, and take a look at the group that they're trying to take over and think about critically analyzing what the author is not saying about the white savior, but what they're saying about the people who are being subjugated by them or led by them. My name is April. This is High Fantasy Writing, and I hope that you are staying safe and healthy. Happy writing.